Hello and welcome to episode 183 of Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty. Of course, I am your host, Rick Doherty. On today's show, we'll be welcoming someone for the first time. Natalie has been a friend of the show for years, but this is her first time actually joining me for a conversation. She's a veteran of Run Disney races and is starting her own podcast about her adventures with preparing for Run Disney. In the 5 years I've lived in Florida, one of my favorite memories is Natalie keeping stride with me and chatting while we both ran the Princess Weekend 10K last year. Another one that has nothing to do with running was back in May of 2022 when Natalie, my co-host Maz, my wife Courtney, and I all sat on a bench right on World Showcase Lagoon to watch Harmonious in the pouring rain. It is about time we had Natalie on the podcast. Before we get started, you know the deal. Like, comment, and most importantly, make sure you are subscribed to the Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty YouTube channel. There is so much we have planned in the near future here on the channel. Later this month, Maz will be joining me to discuss all of the announcements from the D23 Expo in Anaheim, California, the weekend of August 10th. I have media credentials for Tampa Bay Comic-Con, and I'm looking forward to covering those festivities for all of you. Some big names are going to be at Tampa Bay Comic-Con this year, including Anakin Skywalker himself, Hayden Christensen. After taking a bit of a break from being on the show, my other co-host Sarah Says is set to return next month with some really fun topics. There are tons of reasons to be active with the YouTube channel, so please take 30 seconds and make sure you are subscribed. Now let's welcome Natalie to the show. Thanks for being here, Natalie.
Thanks for having me.
So you are entering the rough and tumble world of Disney podcasts. So why don't you just very quickly talk about your brand new Disney-related podcast and what your focus is going to be on the show?
Sure. Our podcast is the Stride Sisters podcast. It's two of my college friends and I are banding together to talk Run Disney. Mostly, we're going to delve into other Disney topics, other Florida theme parks, even outside of Florida, but mostly focused on Run Disney as all three of us are training for the marathon at Marathon Weekend in 2025.
So, Natalie, you have really hit Run Disney hard over the course of the years and have done some really incredible things. You've done a Dopey, you've done Coast to Coast. So first of all, I would like to start with the Disney races coming back to Disneyland. And you have a unique experience that you did the Disney races in Disneyland. And I want to talk about that experience because it's a Run Disney experience I don't personally have. So I would love to hear how those first couple of races worked for you.
Sure. So taking one little step back is that originally I made the decision it was Marathon Weekend or Disneyland. And Disneyland was the decision that I initially made. And part of that was the acceptance that things might be a little bit interesting, first event back in 7 years. And I accepted that because it was going to be just a different experience. Plot twist on that is that I did get a bib for Marathon Weekend and ended up doing the back-to-back weekends coast to coast in 2024. So we did Porque no los dos. It wasn't a second Dopey. It was Goofy, which is the half and the full. But I really enjoyed the Disneyland race experience. There's definitely some growing pains, and I think some things that will improve going through this whole process and as they get reestablished out on the West Coast. But my expectation going in was that things would be a little different from Walt Disney World. The expo's smaller. It's in the Disneyland Hotel in the convention center. I knew that I did enough research to know, because you do your research, but then also expect that, yeah, things might be still different after that. But the expo's smaller. The races start in a parking lot outside Disneyland, but that's not Disney's property. I mean, they own the parking lot, but it's not like within the Disney bubble the way it is when you're in the Epcot parking lot. So There's no characters out there. They can't shoot fireworks off for the start and stuff like that. But I thought honestly it was a really fun time. I enjoyed it. The course map, once you leave property, it's not like Princess where you run up to the castle on the roads and then you're in the in the Magic Kingdom and then you exit after that, but once you're gone, you're gone. You're in Anaheim. I thought it was a fun experience, honestly. Do I need to rush back? Have I registered for any more this year? No, but it was fun, I thought.
So you mostly focus on Run Disney, correct? Your other races, like you don't do a lot of other races besides that, or am I mistaken?
I'm starting to dabble, but you are correct at this point in time. I ran my first half marathon without a race the day before because I ran a local half this spring because I was going for proof of time. But most of my life is in the Disney bubble. Starting to think about branching out, though.
Okay, so I kind of did it the reverse way with running, where I was used to running through random cities like Anaheim, and the in the theme park experience was the new thing for me. So when you talk about just running through Anaheim, I'm like, oh, that's sort of more what I'm used to than the Run Disney experience. What was the atmosphere like for a Run Disney in Disneyland? Because they've been doing it for so long, so regularly in Florida that you have the same people coming back year after year. Everybody knows the ins and outs, so they're ready to just find their corral, go to the expo. They are on top of things. Was it a different type of atmosphere, a different type of crowd over on the West Coast?
So a lot of people that came out to the West Coast came from the East Coast. Not going to say that that was exclusive, but there were a lot of people who did either come directly from Marathon Weekend the way I did, or were used to the East Coast races. I'd say in terms of because it was new for a lot of us, where if you were coming from the East Coast and you had the expectation of this is what, lining up for the 5K feels like, this did subvert the expectation, but I thought in a good way. We started next to the castle. It was awesome. It was like how could you have more of a Run Disney race than starting next to the like your start line is right next to the castle. And even the streets of Anaheim part, I had a blast, right? I just let it rip after, you leave the parks and then I just let it rip. And I ran a PR a week after running a PR in the marathon too. So I thought that energy was great. So just to take one step back to that. But I think people they did have that expectation that things again are going to be the same as they were on the East Coast and down to how corrals also were released where they do more of a full corral goes at once approach but they have more corrals that are smaller
Okay, that makes a lot of
and
sense. Yeah.
it does they didn't have that many more they went down to G for the half marathon so it's not like they went down to P the way that Run Disney of yore did even before my time but because by the time of the half, because I did all three races out at Disneyland, I was the few, the strong, the proud, the Goofy to Dumbo plus the 5K uh, people. And by the morning of the half, I realized that just with again, there's wasn't as much of a reason to get there super early because I was going to save a minute, maybe two, by cramming up to the front of my corral. There was no reason to do that, so I slept in a little later, Run Disney later there wasn't, there's not like there were a lot of character ops because there were no characters really besides the ones they brought out to the start line. They had Donald and Daisy and Mickey and Minnie on their respective days, but there wasn't a whole lot of extra stuff to do. So I actually just enjoyed the extra shut eye after, the marathon of coast to coast. It was kind of nice to sleep a little bit extra.
So let's talk about some of this Run Disney terminology that we're throwing out there. And I guess if somebody isn't very familiar with Run Disney, they wouldn't know what these things mean. So when you say Dopey and Goofy, why don't you explain those terms to people?
Sure. So the Goofy Challenge is during Marathon Weekend. Marathon Weekend is the only race at Walt Disney World that has a marathon, a 26.2 attached to it. The Goofy Challenge is if you run the half marathon and then the marathon the day after for a total of 39.3 miles. And Dopey, on the other hand, is you add a couple days. So you do the 5K on Thursday, the 10K on Friday, the half marathon Saturday, and then the marathon on Sunday for a total of 48.6 miles.
So you have done Dopey. I remember the weekend that you did it. I was so proud of you.
Thank
And
you.
I want to just ask you, how do you prepare for something like that? How do you, not just physically, but mentally prepare? Because for somebody who's never done a Run Disney race, when she talks about sleeping in Run Disney wise, that is a whole different thing. I mean, these Walt Disney World versions of Run Disney, you're getting there at like 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, and you're not getting very much sleep at all, especially if you're on a vacation and you're still trying to take advantage of the parks. So, how did you prepare yourself mentally to go through that grind and know that every day you're doing at least twice as much as you did the day before?
Ask myself that every day. Beyond a strong training program, I had it explained to me from somebody else that Dopey is like a business trip. And I am a traveling bean counter. Well, I used to be a traveling consultant. And it was funny because, like you go to these cities and whatnot, and you might be able to get like away for a day, but you're there to work. So you're working, you're like in a conference room somewhere when you're on a work trip in a lot of cases. So the business trip aspect and the business trip uh, comparison is very apt because you gotta be training yourself to go in bed and realizing I've learned a lot more and paid a lot more attention to exactly how long things take in terms of buses, in terms of, you know, I think I say the witching hour starts around 4 p.m. for me, where I got to start thinking, even if my Guardian's virtual queue gets called, I'm not going on it because if I go on it and then I wait in the virtual queue and then the ride experience is this long, well, it's not completely a no go. It's more of I have to just consider what that's going to do to my sleep and I do get myself in bed around, depends on the race again, but I try to be in bed around 6 o'clock, especially if I'm looking at a marathon the next day. So you got to do a lot of training, and I work in a more sedentary job, so I can't really do all too much about that with training for that aspect of things of being on my feet. Like I can, walk around the office a little bit more, but other than that, I can't really do a whole lot about that. So I just am very cognizant of it. And when I did my first dopey, I was recovering from an ear infection as well. So I was extra careful. I think it was a blessing in disguise because had to be extra, extra careful of what I was doing and, not tiring myself out too much. But, you kind of usually you learn the hard way that, a 6 PM dinner, for example, is a little too late, if you wanna be in bed or depending on when you wanna be in bed.
How do you pace yourself in those early races, knowing that it's almost just a warm up for the main event coming in a couple days? Do you worry about your time for the 5K and the 10K, or do you more take it easy, just make sure you finish ahead of the balloon ladies who will sweep you? And as long as you do that, you're fine.
So it's a little bit of that's something that you wanna practice within training is if you are planning on, like, walking the 10K, for example, you wanna practice that within your training because while you probably put a little bit less strain on certain muscles, you do add your time on feet. So, it's a balance and it's a trade-off of what you want to do with yourself because I've learned that for me, that when I'm training and, like, training the half to full simulation, just where we simulate the distances and we build them up like Dopey, like Goofy, that actually running the half simulation and running a good chunk of it is better for me because sometimes I just need to get like a little bit of that out of my legs, just that jitters out of my legs during the half. It's something that you have to train, but I try to think of each race in its singledom of the 5K is the 5K. It's fun. This is great. We're all here. We're all like excited for this next 4 days or next couple of days. 10K also, it's like, okay, we introduce balloons. We introduce that 16-minute like enforced pace, but that's okay. Usually where I'm bad, and maybe not bad is not the word, but is the half marathon. So, and this also goes for weekends where the challenge caps in a half marathon, where the 10K is where I start freaking out a little bit. And that's where I have to kind of talk myself down of like, okay, even if you're trying to like go for something big tomorrow, this is fun. We're going character stops. We're having a good time. We're dressed up. My costumes get a little less elaborate throughout the weekend and they turn more into, running clothes plus like accessory to like show I am Mickey Mouse. Enough for me to show versus I carried a harmonious barge around for a 5K once.
That's right. I do remember when you did that one. So we talked about the character spots, or you just mentioned them a little bit. How do you make the decision to do character stops? Does it matter more who's the character, if it's rare, or do you have certain races where you say, I'm going to try to take advantage of the character stops, and some where you're like, I just have to worry about my time and I can't worry about the characters?
It's a mixed approach. If there is basically no line and I know I have the time and I know it's not something where I'm like I'm really caring that much about my time, I'll stop for the character. During Princess Weekend, for example, there's only so many princesses and princess adjacents that you can have. So usually by the half, we have repeats. So I try to hit them pretty much all in the 5K to 10K to the extent that I can. And sometimes I do still miss out on something on the half, but it's never been somebody who I am just like bent over. Like one of the things that I would stop for at all costs, except then one time I didn't, is Remy the rat. So, I didn't during he was out during the full this year, and I did not stop for him because it was, like, mile 5-ish going into 6, and I was just kind of in the zone. I'm like, "I sorry, Remy." But anyway, sorry, my guy. But for a while, he was my drop dead stop. Like, I must stop for him, and I did get him, at Springtime Surprise in 2023, so I have gotten a picture with Z-Rat, and I'm sure he'll be out at Wine and Dine this year due to the theme. But I kind of try to strategize like certain things where I don't want to say I don't care, but it's not if it's like a super long line and it's someone who I don't really like feel like I have a super tight attachment to, I just don't. Like, if there's a short line and it's somebody who I don't really have that much of an attachment to, great. We'll wait in it. But, obviously, if it's something where I'm going for time or this year and I try not to do too many Run Disney races for time. It's hard for me to not do a marathon, like, for time. It's time plus shenanigans, such as getting a drink, in World Showcase, riding Everest, etcetera. It's time plus shenanigans. But it's hard for me to I usually try not to take my run especially now that I've unlocked the idea of you can run a half marathon without running a 10K and a 5K the days prior in local races. But I do try to mostly kind of, I keep joking that for Wine and Dine this year, because it's part of I'm doing Wine and Dine and part of the build up to Marathon Weekend and Dopey in 2025, that if I'm on the course less than 4 hours, I've done something wrong because I just want to get every picture I can, just vibes all around, just enjoy the race and get every goofy little character out there. And again, if I'm on there less than 4 hours, I'm going to be sad.
Yeah, it is definitely a real different vibe for a Run Disney race than other races where sometimes you just don't even put on the Garmin and you're like, I'm just going to enjoy myself. And the only clock is the balloon ladies who might sweep you at the end. I know that when you talk about those drop dead characters, those ones that you have to meet, my first Run Disney race was the Princess Half Marathon in 2020, like 2 weeks before the world shut down.
Oof.
And I said that I wanted to make it to the 7 mile mark without stopping to walk. I was like, if I can just make it to the 7 mile mark, I'll be over halfway through the race. And then I'll know that I can take my time in the second half and not have to worry about the balloon ladies. So I'm in Magic Kingdom. I'm about to hit like 6 miles, maybe 6.5. And we get to Frontierland, and there's Chip and Dale in their
Oh,
Western wear. And I'm like,
oh,
nope, I can't hit 7. I can't hit 7 miles. I got to get this picture. And I'm glad I did because, like I said, the world shut down like 2 weeks later. And I don't like to think about all those people crammed into it wasn't 2 weeks later. Maybe it was like a month and a half later. All the people crammed into corrals with me from all over the world who were probably coughing up heaven knows what at the time. But but I just think of those character interactions where sometimes you just have to say this is too important, and you're doing a Run Disney race instead of a regular race for a reason. And one of those reasons is to stop and get the picture at Galaxy's Edge at 4 o'clock in the morning. One of the reasons is to meet the characters. If you want to go out and try to set your personal record, there are cheaper, better organized races for that purpose. But if you want to just have a blast out on the course and get to see things in Disney that you don't normally get to see, that's where I think the Run Disney races really go to the next level.
for sure. There's definitely space for both. It seems like Princess Half Marathon ends up being like that race where I it's I guess this is the first year that it's been my season cap, but it's 6 weeks after the marathon, so usually, like, I still have that marathon fitness in me, so I keep PRing the Princess Half Marathon accidentally, and especially this year. It was about a month before is when they announced that the proof of time deadline would be, or it would expand to be a 2:30, and since I accidentally PR'd, like, by 7 minutes the week before, I'm like, "Well, maybe I can cut another 7." Not the week before, but at Disneyland. So, I figured that there's definitely space for both, and it's awesome because then they have the, Galloway Pacers will be out, and I was able to hang with them during Princess this year for a bit, and that definitely, while it was running outside the fitness that I had at the moment a little bit, wasn't by too much. It was great to have that, and it was like a motivating factor, and it was great to turn the brain off too. Of they counted the intervals, they kept us on track, and then I lost them because I stopped for the castle picture, and I thought I was going to be able to catch back up because I ran ahead so I could get it, and then they were too far away, and I knew I was done.
Yeah, that's another great thing that Disney does. Some other races do it too, but Disney does it really, really well, where they have pacers who will literally run at a particular pace. So you can say, if I want to finish with this time, I run with this group of people and I will do that. And you don't have to keep looking down at your Garmin or keep figuring out, okay, well, if I slow down in the second half, I can only slow down to you just focus on running with your group of people. And if you do that, then you will hit your time. And that's a really good thing because Disney, when we talk about inclusion and things like that on the podcast all the time, and one of the best ways to include people is to have races that are beneficial to people of all skill levels. That's an inclusion
Yes.
area as well, where it's not just people who are running 7, 8 minute miles. You're also getting those people who are doing a 15-minute mile and just trying to stay ahead of the balloon ladies. So it is a really good thing that they do with Run Disney. I want to talk about something that a lot of people might not think about. You talked about managing your rest and trying to get back to the hotel, get as much sleep as possible, make sure that you are well rested for the next day. Maybe you don't hit quite as many rides the day before at the theme parks. But how do you deal with food? Because I know a lot of people, when they're on a running plan, they're also on some sort of food plan. And most people, especially when you're vacationing, you show up to Walt Disney World and every diet plan that you have in the world just goes out the window. But you can't really do that when you're running 4 races in a weekend. You still have to kind of think about what you're putting in your body and the fuel you're using, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I do work with a running coach, and just to specify, and it's like a group, it's a Run Disney person. She does big group programs, and she will like kind of stresses to us about like fueling, and she has graphics on how to fuel in a Disney park too, or like, here are some good options, like some that you can use. And like this is like a good balance of protein, carb, fat, your protein, carb, fats, because you do need to make sure you are refueling. And she's big on, don't skip fueling on your 5K, 10K day, because that'll catch up to you come half marathon day, come marathon day. So it requires some discipline for sure. But then also, if I want the Dole Whip, I get the Dole Whip. Like I'm running, like I get the Dole Whip. I'm not going to fuel exclusively on Dole Whip, because that's not going to end well, and I'm going to have a very sad tummy if I do that. However, I do try to, just have balance, and I have like my favorites for dinners. I am going to try to tweak something in this next season to see, because I take an old lady dinner. I like to eat dinner at 3:30 p.m. I'm not kidding. It is annoying to everybody if around, but 3:30, you spend an hour-ish at dinner, hour 15, that's almost 5. You get on your bus back from Disney Springs, like, you're looking at 6 PM. 6 PM comes so fast, especially if you wanna be, make sure, have yourself in bed by then, so if it takes time to fall asleep, you're getting your sleep in. But yeah, I'm trying this summer, or this season, I'm gonna try for wine and dine, is I'm gonna try to eat around, like, 1 o'clock, and have, like, some sort of either, like, leftovers or, like, food in the room to, like, just for that last, like, dinner, but I have my heavy meal out of the way at, like, 1 o'clock noon. I'm so ready to be an old person that's, like, eating the, like, senior special.
You're going to be covering a lot of different Run Disney topics on your podcast, and I definitely hope everyone checks it out. But before I let you go, I just want to talk about some of the changes that have been coming to Walt Disney World. And I know you probably haven't experienced all of them yet, but what are you thinking as you sort of look at things like Tiana's Bayou Adventure, the Country Bear Musical Jamboree? Is there anything that really excites you for your next trip beyond just Run Disney? Some things that you're excited to see for the first time now?
Everything. I am so, so excited to ride Tiana's. I cannot wait to ride. I cannot wait to run past it all lit up in Magic Kingdom when it's going to be, for a half marathon, when it's going to be dark out. I cannot wait.
I didn't even think of that. That's going to be beautiful.
Oh, it's going to be gorgeous, and I cannot wait to experience that.
That's amazing. Once again, plug the brand new podcast, Natalie.
Sure, it's the Stride Sisters podcast. That's where it is on all the socials, on Twitter X, Instagram. I believe we have a TikTok. Clearly, I don't run that one. And my co-hosts and I are looking forward to bringing you all kinds of Run Disney topics, knowledge, our favorite things as we stumble through training. One of my co-hosts, it's her first marathon. One of them, it's her first Dopey, which makes me the experienced one of the group, which is kind of like when somebody's been working at a job for 3 months and is told to teach the new hires what to do.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Thank you so much, Natalie. Have a great day.
Thanks, you too.
As I mentioned earlier, the D23 Expo is coming up in a little over a week in Anaheim, California. There's some major announcements expected from the Walt Disney Company regarding movies, television shows, and most importantly for our purposes, the theme parks. We'll hopefully hear more about what Disney is going to be doing with Dino Land USA and Disney's Animal Kingdom, what the plans are for Beyond Big Thunder Mountain Railroad in Magic Kingdom, and if the company has any concrete plans for the Disneyland Forward project. Those are all things that realistically could be announced, but there are also some dark horse candidates for us really hardcore Disney fans. Maybe they will finally commit to a refurbishment to Journey into Imagination with Figment that will keep the lovable purple fellow in Epcot, especially with his sustained popularity with park merchandise. Maybe Disney will finally decide it makes financial sense to fix and reopen the People Mover over in Disneyland's Tomorrowland. All of that is possible, even if some of the announcements are more likely than others. This has been episode 183 of Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty. I will be back next Thursday with another brand new episode of the show. We'll take a break from theme park content for the first time in over 2 years. It has been my desire to branch out a little bit and cover other topics in the worlds of travel and pop culture. My guest next week will be Ethan Galagli, who is the author of the book The Trail, a Novel. As many of you know, hiking is another passion of mine, and I walked Ireland's National Famine Way back in 2022 to raise money and awareness in the fight against domestic violence. Ethan is a big proponent in average people getting out into nature and seeing some of the beautiful hiking trails, especially on the west coast of the United States. So much of the focus with theme parks is centered around boarding groups, dining reservations, and just being glued to your phone. That can be fun a lot of the time, but it can also be rewarding to get out into nature and take nice, big breaths while putting one foot in front of the other. That will be next Thursday on Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty. Until then, have a great week.